single dad thought he'd eat alone until a mother said, "My son's hungry, can we stay a while?" The diner on Maple Street had been there for 40 years. Tom Hayes knew this because he'd been coming here since he was a boy, back when his own father would take him for pancakes on Saturday mornings. Now at 53, Tom found himself sitting in the same red vinyl booth by the window, but the chair across from him was empty. It was a Tuesday evening in late autumn, the kind of evening when the sky turned purple early and the streetlights flickered on before most people left their offices. Tom had just picked up his son, 7-year-old Lucas, from his ex-wife's house. Their custody arrangement meant he got Lucas every other week, and tonight was supposed to be their night together. But Lucas had complained of a stomachache in the car. By the time they reached Tom's apartment, the boy was running a fever. Tom had called the pediatrician, given Lucas some medicine, and tucked him into bed with his favorite stuffed bear. The doctor said it was probably just a virus. Nothing serious, but Lucas needed rest and fluids. So now Tom sat alone in the diner, looking at the menu he'd memorized decades ago. He'd already ordered the meatloaf special, Lucas's favorite, thinking he'd bring it home in case the boy felt hungry later. But he'd also ordered the pot roast for himself, and a slice of apple pie, because eating alone in a diner somehow felt less lonely than eating alone in his apartment. The waitress, a woman named Diane who'd worked here since Tom was in high school, brought his coffee. She didn't ask where Lucas was. She'd seen enough of life to know that sometimes people sat alone for reasons they didn't want to explain. Tom wrapped his hands around the warm mug and looked out the window. The rain had started, soft and steady, turning the sidewalk dark and making the neon sign of the pharmacy across the street blur into pink and blue smudges. He thought about his son, small and pale in the too-big bed, and felt the familiar weight of single fatherhood pressing on his shoulders. It had been 3 years since the divorce, 3 years of splitting holidays and missing soccer games and learning to braid hair from YouTube videos. He loved Lucas more than anything in the world, but some nights the loneliness was like a physical thing, heavy and cold. The door chimed as someone entered. Tom glanced up out of habit, then looked back at his coffee. A woman stood near the entrance, shaking rain from her coat. She had dark hair, pulled back, tired eyes, and the kind of face that suggested she'd been pretty once, before life got complicated. She was maybe 45, 46. In her arms she carried a little boy, maybe 3 years old, with blonde hair and big eyes that looked too serious for a child that age. The woman spoke quietly to the hostess, then glanced around the diner. It was nearly empty, just Tom, an elderly couple near the back, and a truck driver at the counter nursing a cup of black coffee. Tom saw her shoulders sag slightly. She looked down at the little boy, whispered something, and the child nodded. They moved toward a booth near the door, but Tom noticed the woman didn't sit down. She just stood there, holding the boy, looking at the menu on the wall with an expression Tom recognized. He'd worn it himself back in the early days after the divorce, when his bank account was still recovering from lawyer fees and setting up a new apartment. It was the look of someone calculating whether they could afford a meal. Diane approached the woman with her order pad, friendly but professional. Tom couldn't hear what they were saying, but he saw the woman shake her head, saw her say something brief, saw Diane nod and walk away. The woman set the little boy down on the bench of the booth. The child immediately leaned against her, his small hand gripping the sleeve of her coat. She put her arm around him and stared out the window at the rain. Tom looked down at his own table. His food had just arrived. The meatloaf looked perfect, covered in gravy with a mountain of mashed potatoes. The pot roast smelled like his grandmother's kitchen. The apple pie sat waiting, a scoop of vanilla ice cream slowly melting on top. He picked up his fork, then set it down. His father had taught him something long ago. "Tom," he'd said, after they'd given their spare change to a man on the street corner, "you don't need to fix the whole world. But if you can make one person's day a little bit easier, you've done something that matters." Tom stood up. He felt his heart beating a little faster, the way it always did when he was about to step outside his comfort zone. He picked up the plate with the meatloaf and walked across the diner. The woman looked up as he approached. Her eyes widened slightly, wary. "Excuse me," Tom said, keeping his voice gentle. "I'm sorry to bother you. I ordered this for my son, but he's at home sick. It's just going to go to waste." He held out the plate. I thought maybe your boy might be hungry." The woman stared at him. For a moment, Tom thought she might be offended, might think he was pitying her. He almost turned away. Then the little boy looked up at the plate, and Tom saw his eyes go wide. The woman started. Her voice caught. She blinked rapidly. "That's very kind of you, but—" "Please," Tom said, "really. It's just going to go in the trash otherwise. And that seems like a waste of a perfectly good meatloaf." He smiled. "Besides, Diane's been making this recipe for 40 years. It's the best in 3 counties. The little boy tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mama," he whispered, "I'm hungry." The woman looked at her son, then back at Tom. Something in her face crumbled. Just for a second, and Tom saw the exhaustion beneath it, the kind of tiredness that came from carrying too much for too long. "Thank you," she said quietly. That's incredibly kind." Tom set the plate down on their table. "You're welcome." He started to walk away, then stopped. "Actually," he heard himself say, "I've got a whole other plate over there, and way too much pie. Would you like to join me? I hate eating alone." The woman hesitated. The little boy was already reaching for the fork. "I'm Tom," he said. "Tom Hayes. I'm completely harmless, I promise. Just a dad having dinner without his kid for a change." The woman studied his face for a long moment. Tom understood. The world had taught women to be careful. He waited, patient, keeping his expression open and friendly. "I'm Grace," she said finally. "Grace Morrison. And this is my son, Eli." "Nice to meet you both," Tom said. "Come on over. There's more food than I can eat. And the booth by the window is the best seat in the house." They gathered their things. Eli clutched a small toy car in one hand. Grace picked up her purse, and Tom noticed it was worn at the edges. Carefully maintained but old. They settled into Tom's booth. Eli's eyes were fixed on the meatloaf, but he waited for his mother to cut it for him before he took a bite. When he did, his whole face lit up. "Good?" Grace asked softly. Eli nodded, chewing carefully. "It's really good, Mama." Tom pushed his plate of pot roast toward the center of the table. "Please help yourself. There's plenty." Grace hesitated, then took a small bite. She closed her eyes briefly. "This is delicious. Thank you. Really, you don't know how much this means." Tom waved a hand. "It's just dinner. Nothing special." "It's special to us," Grace said. She looked down at Eli, who was eating slowly, savoring each bite. "We've had a long day." Tom didn't press for details. He just nodded. "Those happen sometimes." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Diane came by to refill Tom's coffee and brought a glass of milk for Eli without being asked. She gave Tom a small, knowing smile. "How old is your son?" Grace asked. "The one who's sick." "Lucas is 7, Tom said. "He's got a fever, nothing serious, but he needs to rest. He was pretty disappointed we couldn't have our dinner together tonight." "You must miss him," Grace said. "I do," Tom admitted. "I only get him every other week." "Shared custody. It's hard being apart from him so much, but I try to make the most of the time we have." Grace nodded slowly. "I understand. I was married once. Eli's father left when he was just a baby, so it's been the 2 of us ever since." "That must be difficult," Tom said. "Some days more than others," Grace said. She looked out the window at the rain. "Today was one of the harder ones. My car broke down this morning. I took the bus to work, but I had to leave Eli with my neighbor. And then the bus was late coming back. By the time I picked him up, it was past dinner time. And I realized I'd left my wallet at home with the grocery money. I had just enough change for bus fare back. But," she trailed off, shaking her head, "I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm telling you all this, because sometimes it helps to say it out loud," Tom said gently. "And because I've been there, maybe not the exact same situation, but close enough. After my divorce, there were nights I ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so I could afford to buy Lucas new shoes." Grace looked at him, really looked at him, and Tom saw recognition in her eyes. The recognition of someone who'd walked a similar path. "It gets better," Tom said. "I know that probably doesn't help right now, but it does. You find your rhythm. You figure out what matters and what doesn't. And your son, he's going to remember that you were there, that you kept going even when it was hard." "I hope so," Grace said softly. "Sometimes I worry I'm not doing enough." "You're here," Tom said. "You're taking care of him. You're making sure he eats, even if it means you don't. That's not just enough. That's everything. Eli had finished his meatloaf. He yawned, a big jaw-cracking yawn, and leaned against his mother. "Someone's getting tired," Grace said, stroking his hair. Tom signaled to Diane and quietly asked her to box up the rest of the pot roast and the apple pie. When she brought the containers, he pushed them across the table to Grace. "For tomorrow," he said. "Or later tonight if Eli gets hungry again." Grace's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back. "You don't have to do this." "I know," Tom said. "But I want to. We all need help sometimes. I've been the one needing it, and I've been the one able to give it. That's just how life works. We take turns." Grace wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I don't know how to thank you." "You just did," Tom said. "Besides, you helped me too. I really didn't want to eat alone tonight." They sat there for a while longer, talking about small things. Grace worked as a receptionist at a dentist's office. Tom was a high school history teacher. They talked about their kids, about the rain, about the diner, and how places like this were becoming rare. They talked like old friends, like people who understood each other without having to explain everything. When it was time to go, Tom insisted on paying for everything. He walked them to the door and Grace turned to face him. "Thank you, Tom," she said, "for the food and for the kindness, and for treating us like people, not like a problem." "You're not a problem," Tom said. "You're just a good mother doing her best. That's something to be proud of." Grace smiled, a real smile that made her look younger. "Maybe we'll see you here again sometime." "I'd like that," Tom said. "Take care of yourself, Grace, and you too, Eli." The little boy, half asleep in his mother's arms, waved a small hand. Tom watched them walk into the rain, Grace holding Eli close, carrying the food he'd given them. He felt something warm in his chest, something that had been missing for a while. When he turned back, Diane was wiping down the counter. She caught his eye and nodded, the way people do when they've witnessed something meaningful. Tom drove home through the rain, thinking about connection, about how sometimes strangers could remind you what mattered. When he got to his apartment, he checked on Lucas. The boy was sleeping peacefully, his fever broken, his stuffed bear tucked under one arm. Tom sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, watching his son breathe. Then he went to his own room, feeling less alone than he had in a long time. He never saw Grace and Eli again. Sometimes he looked for them at the diner, but they never came back. He hoped they were doing well. He hoped things had gotten easier for them. But he thought about them often, especially on the hard days, and he remembered what his father had taught him. That making one person's day a little bit easier was something that mattered. It was enough. If this story touched your heart, I'd be grateful if you'd take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to hear more stories about the small moments of kindness that connect us all. Leave a comment below and tell me about a time when a stranger's kindness made a difference in your life. Thank you for listening. And remember, we all need help sometimes, and that's okay.